We move now to Senator Gignac.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Bonjour, Mark. Thank you to be with us today. So I've read your book as well, and my question would be around this climate change challenge that we have. In the last budget, Madame Freeland has mentioned that we need probably to invest 120 billion to 150 billion a year if we want to reach a net zero economy. And currently we invest only 15, 20 billions a year. So I just want to have your opinion on the potential role of Canadian pension fund in Canada, because they have scaled down their exposure big time over the last few decades. Some completely getting out, phasing out of oil sands exposure. And in your nice interview that you gave at the World Economic Forum, you mentioned that the easiest thing to do is to sell and walk away, make it somebody else's problem. And I will refrain myself to mention which pension fund has done that. But the point is the biggest challenge is to support them and best to reduce their footprint, the carbon footprint. So my question is simple. Do the Canadian government, or do we have to be more active, proactive, and have asked the pension fund to have more oversight on pension fund, because I have some concern that Canada will be unable to succeed the transition without the participation, more active participation pension fund. Any thought on that?
Yes, and it is good to see you, Senator Gignac. And as usual, straight to the heart of the matter. I would say as follows. First off, this is a huge issue. And it's a fundamental issue, whether it's pension funds or banks or others. We will not get to climate sustainability. We will not get on the pathway to net zero if all we do is divest. For the individual institution, there's the comfort of portfolio decarbonization, but there's not decarbonization in the real economy. And firmly believe what we need to do is to get capital to those companies and projects that have a plan to reduce emissions, and not just reduce emissions, but reduce emissions in line with the trajectory that Canada has set itself on, the Canadian government has set ourselves on. And so what are we doing about that? And I would say there's a diversity of strategies at this point amongst Canadian pension funds. There are some, such as the Canada Pension Plan, I will name them, and Ontario Teachers as two examples, and PSP actually a third example, who have identified, and they use slightly different terminology around this, but they have both green and transition assets. So the green assets are clear, renewable power, as an example, wind power or hydropower, these types of things, storage, etc. But transition assets are assets where there are emissions, but the investment is getting the emissions down. So think about what Dofasco ArcelorMittal is doing in the steel sector. Think about the investments in our auto sector that are happening, that moving towards electric vehicles and targeting investments that get those emissions down. And that will be critical, including in the energy sector, obviously, if the oil sands pathway, for example, comes to being and has the potential to take out high single digits of Canada's emissions over the course of the next decade. That will require capital. And it's the type of investment that's potentially very suitable for our pension funds. Now, if you permit me, I'm going to take one step up, which is, and I'll just refer to the work of the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. Some pension funds are part of it. Canadian banks are part of it. Others are part of it. And what we are doing is bringing together an approach for transition, which includes these types of investments and the discipline around these types of investment. Again, a common theme, if you will, of our discussion thus far is we need direction, but also discipline around the direction. We need guardrails around it so that it really does what it says, and so that we get capital to investments for the transition. Last point. what could the Canadian government do, or what could our regulators, authorities do? Well, one of the questions of financial institutions is, do you have a transition plan for your investments, for your loan book? After all, the country has a legislated objective for net zero. You're investing in Canada. What is your plan? Who are you backing, and how are you moving from where you are today to where you want to get to tomorrow? And in those transition plans, if we have a definition of transition assets, not just green is incredibly important, but we also need to get emissions down from the parts of our economy that exist today. And if the ambition is sufficiently high for those projects and investment, then it should be appropriate. It should be counted as transition. And then we see our pensions and other forms of capital really put to work on behalf of Canada and its objectives.